Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Gotthard, titled Bang. Now, I've made no secret of the fact that I've got an unironic love of hair metal and hard rock, the sort that was prevalent throughout the 1980s. Sure, it was dumb, it was cheesy, and occasionally ridiculously chauvinist, but it was a genre that at least was willing to go over the top when it came to instrumental prowess, bombast, and a sense of fun to really elevate the material, which was a huge redeeming factor for me. And thus, I can appreciate the irony that the hair metal and hard rock that I would come to love effectively died out around the time I was born, replaced by a grunge and alternative scene that I never really embraced in the same way. But you know what? The fun fact is that Nirvana and Pearl Jam didn't really kill the genre so much that the genre simply killed itself through oversaturation, overexposure, and a lot of mediocre bands riding the trend, especially in the tail end of the 80s. And thus in 2008, after listening to 01, 011, 001, the newest magnificent prog metal project from Arion, I decided to check out the band of Steve Lee, one of the singers that Arion brought along to be associated with that particular project. That band was Gotthard, a Swiss hard rock act that started in 1992, a few years after its brand of hard rock was supposed to be dead, and yet they still managed to sustain a career. And they're one of my favorite bands of all time. No, I'm not kidding. A retro hard rock act with a terrible pun for a name is also one of my favorite bands. And they're also the act I tend to point to when saying that this particular brand of hard rock is actually worth defending over their decades-long career. I mean, their cover of Bob Dylan's Mighty Quinn has been my ringtone for 5 years. It's outlasted this brand of phone. So okay, what makes Gotthard worth a damn? Well, in comparison with most hard rock acts, Gotthard actually has a melodic focus, which lean more towards the killer hooks over displays of sheer instrumental prowess. And while the band does have its fair share of cheesy ridiculousness, they also weren't bad songwriters and weren't afraid to take risks with their material or venture into different genres altogether. The combination of those two factors has meant Gotthard has made some killer rock ballads over the years, especially in their mid-period work in the late 90s and early 2000s. However, most people remember Gotthard for their frontman Steve Lee, who honestly might have been one of the best hard rock vocalists in the industry. It wasn't just that he had an impossible range that remained emotionally compelling and incredibly expressive, but like Mariah Carey, he made it look easy. Sadly, Steve Lee passed away in a motorcycle accident in October of 2010, and Gotthard brought in a new replacement for him with Nick Mader for their 2012 album Firebirth. And while that album is pretty good, it's also decidedly transitory, as Mader was trying to step into some pretty big shoes, and he didn't seem to quite fill them, at least initially. And thus, when I heard that they were releasing a new album this year with Bang, I was excited, I admit that. Hopefully touring and songwriting with more of the band had improved their chemistry, and this new incarnation of Gotthard hopefully would be able to impress me. So, how's the album? Holy crap, this album kicks all amounts of ass. I'm not going to lie, I didn't expect a lot from Gotthard going into this album other than a measurably good record. But Bang by Gotthard was a ton of fun and will easily end up being on my list of my favorite albums of the year. At the same time though, it's also very much a record that plays directly to my personal musical sensibilities. I mean, a hard rock record featuring killer melodic hooks, surprisingly strong lyrics, strong guitar solos, blues-inspired organ riffs, and then you add symphonic elements? Shit, were they just making this album just for me? Because that's just a huge list of things I like in rock music. But first, let's start with the instrumentation, because I gotta feel I have to defend this. So, as much as I said, so much of this album is just vintage Gotthard at its best. Strong, memorable hooks, solid guitar solos that feel cohesive with the rest of the song and never go on too long, great keyboard riffs, and a lot of crunch in the varied guitar tones. In fact, on that basis, this is probably Gotthard's most rough-edged album since Dial Hard in the 90s, especially in the rhythm guitar, and the crisp, clean production lets all of that actually come through. And yet, unlike Dial Hard, it doesn't just wallow in chest-thumping debauchery and does actually manage to switch up the guitar tones, with Feel What I Feel feeling that it could pull off straight off of Lip Service, and Red on a Sleeve could have been a solid cut from either Human Zoo or Domino Effect. And yet the band actually does take steps towards a richer well of instrumentation, with the blues/Whitesnake inspiration in Speed Your Wings to the naked symphonic elements in I Won't Look Down, Maybe, What You Get, and the 11-minute power ballad Thank You. If I do have a complaint here, it's in the ballads, namely that we don't have enough of them. This was a problem with Firebird as well, as the slower moments really do show some well-picked guitar, and I wanted to hear more of it. On top of that, while I find the symphonic elements and the inclusion of female backing vocals a welcome change, I do think that they could have had a little bit more richer depth in their production, with a little bit more grandeur for some of their instrumentation. Just a minor nitpick there. Now, this takes us to Nick Mader's vocals, and honestly, if I was uncertain about his last performance on that last album, he won me over here, and for reasons I didn't quite expect. Part of my issues with that last album is that he seemed to be trying a little bit too hard to mimic Steve Lee's vocal style. Here, he doesn't bother, and he sounds a lot more comfortable sticking in his own range, and it pays big dividends. The big surprise for me was how really great his lower range was. Rich, expressive, emotionally compelling, it adds a lot to selling the greater emotions of the songs, and yet still having that huge amount of presence you need to back up these sort of material. Unfortunately, his presence only highlights Melody Tibbetts on the duet Maybe, and not exactly in a good way. She's far from a bad singer, don't get me wrong, but she's not quite have enough grit and real passion behind her delivery to really sell her lyrics in the song, and just she comes a little bit, the track feels a little off balance to me. And speaking of lyrics, oh boy, this is where I'm gonna have to lose some of you, because to say the lyrics on this album are great or anything close to insightful, even by hard rock standards, would be stretching the truth. And arguably, this has always been an issue with this genre, especially in the elements that call back to the 80s. The lyrics are either cheesy as hell or don't even try to make sense, instead of operating on rule of cool and assuming that the audience isn't going to care about the lyrics either. And right out of the gate with the title track, we do get some of that, and even though I really do like that song, it really isn't about anything outside of Gotthard being awesome. And yeah, they definitely back it up, but at the same time, as a fan, I know they've made plenty of songs in this particular vein before, which is arguably the bigger problem with the song as a whole. That said, the band does deliver some solid lyrics with some credible nuance here. Feel What You Feel is about desperately trying to hold on to that one-night stand connection where the narrator feels some sparks of love and he feels he'll never be able to find the girl otherwise. C'est La Vie is about confronting and still trying to go for your dreams that feel farther and farther away with the onset of time. Spread Your Wings is about letting an ex actually go and realizing that he might have been the person holding her back in the end. Maybe is about the indecision regarding change in a troubled relationship and finding out where the real problems are and being able to change for your partner. And Thank You, it's a heartfelt letter to the mother of guitarist Leon Leone, who passed away. Now, I will say, the weaker songs on this album are where the band gets a little defensive or gimmicky in their lyrics, with My Belief being a shot in an X that comes across as a little bit too sour, and Mr. Ticketman just coming across as nowhere near as clever as it thinks it is. And look, while I definitely like Red on a Sleeve, it feels a little bit like Janie's Not Alone Part 2 to really be excused. And yeah, look, you can say it's cheesy and hyperbolic and ridiculous and entirely two or even one-dimensional when it comes to this album. And for the most part, I'd agree with you. Hell, I even expect the band knows it too. You don't make this many albums in this genre without developing some degree of self-awareness. But what makes this album work, and indeed what makes the majority of Gotthard's discography work so well, is presentation and focus. They know exactly what they are, and they work to be the best possible version of it. It's the same reason why I love AC/DC, or a more apt example, Andrew WK, and it works for the same reason they do. Gotthard embodies the ridiculous hard rock fantasy completely unironically, and not only do they nail it and add a lot of different flavors and killer melodies and hooks along the way, they add different elements of that flavor. They are not afraid to experiment, and they're talented enough to be taken both seriously and with a sense of lighthearted fun at the same time. Remember fun? Honestly, that sense of fun will probably end up making Bang by Gotthard one of the most enjoyable listens of the year. So yeah, I love this album. Is it Gotthard's best album? No, I wouldn't say that. Lip Service, Open, and Domino Effect are pretty difficult to beat in my books, and it'll take some time to see whether or not the singles from Bang hold up as well as some of the real classics. But that doesn't mean this isn't a goddamn great album that definitely deserves your attention if you're a fan at all of 80s inspired hard rock. You know what? Hell, even if you're not, the hooks, the rock edge, the great vocal delivery, and even some of the lyrics make this album definitely worth your time and worth defending. For me, yeah, I'm going with it. 9 out of 10, because Gotthard might not have been a band from the era where hard rock and hair metal ruled the radio, but even now, they definitely deserve to be considered at the top of their field and at the top of the format. Check these guys out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know I went on for a little bit long in this video, but you guys have to check this album out. It's so much fun. It's so good. Until then, if there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums you want me to check out, I'm more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark. I'll see you next time.